The trade late Wednesday night. The Vancouver Canucks get Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. The Flames get Andrei Kuzmenko, a 2024 first rounder, 2 D prospects, and a conditional 2024 fourth round pick. And that condition, according to, so Craig Conroy went on the radio with my close personal friend, Pat Steinberg, who I love and miss dearly, even though I'm giving him a shout out. He doesn't listen to the show, but I'll tell him I said this.
I know for a fact that Pat doesn't listen to the show.
No chance. But Craig told Pat on the radio that the condition is it'll go up to a third round pick if the Canucks make the Western Conference final. Mm-hmm. So that's the full trade. I feel like, Drance had a story last night, and it was like, this was the perfect fit for the Canucks. And I think I'll obviously get to you guys for your opinions on this trade. But for me, the fact that the Canucks made that deal without giving up any of their premium assets other than that first round pick to get a guy that is exactly what they needed, that's pretty good work by Patrick Allvin, who signed a new contract yesterday as well.
I'm with Drancer on this too, by the way. And if you haven't read the column, it's, to the point. You should
do it.
And I think pretty direct. Headline is Canucks go all in. Why Elias Lindholm was the best available hockey fit. It's true. They needed another top 6 center. I think we're looking at line projections. He's going to center. He's going to play center, and Pettersson's going to play left wing on the first line, which is just a fascinating combination. And I think that sort of is a nice. I think that in and of itself is a nice counterbalance to maybe some people who are less high on the trade for Vancouver, which is it's a valid thing to say about Elias Lindholm, is that he struggles when he's not playing with elite players. It's true. Like when he moved away from
that over the last few years.
True for a lot of players, not unique to him. How many guys are you going to move away from Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau and not see some kind of dip? Johnny Gaudreau, by the way, for the record, has seen quite a drop when he's not playing with Elias Lindholm. It's worth noting, but we can say
it's
definitively
probably a bit more of a being on the Blue Jackets thing.
I was being a smart ass, yeah, but we can say pretty definitively, Elias Lindholm was the third guy on that line, but also he's still a really good player. In the top 6 is such in Vancouver that he's going to be playing with elite players again, whether it's Elias Pettersson, whether it's JT Miller, whether it's Brock Besser, who's produced at a near elite level this year. They're going to find some kind of combination for him in that top 6 where that stacks it up and puts him next to high octane dudes. And the other thing is the power play. He's a power play weapon. We know this to be true. And the rich kid richer as far as that's concerned in Vancouver. I love it. I love it for them. I love it for them because this is a year for them. The West is open in a way that it isn't always, and the Canucks are better than they typically are. This is such a Jim Rutherford trade, and I love everything about it for that man. Go all in. Try to win it when you can, because who knows how many of these chances you get.
I like it too. I think there will be teams that are other sellers that will be happy with this return for Calgary. And I just ultimately think what you view of the price Vancouver paid depends what you think of Andrei Kuzmenko. Obviously, I think we can all agree that the 27% shooting percentage year he had that led him to 39 goals and 70 whatever points got him that $5.5 million deal.
Yeah, and the 2-year extension, right?
That's probably not happening again. But at $5.5 million, if you have a player who you trust to be a above 50% expected goals player who's going to score 25-ish goals, above 50 points, I think that's an asset you can either go forward with or plan to trade if he does rebound next year, if you are going to go more rebuild. The other assets, the first round pick is the standard going rate for a player of Elias Lindholm's caliber. And so if Kuzmenko gets you something additional to that, you really like the price for Calgary. But where I like it for Vancouver is that I don't think they care. I think they would have wanted to move off of Kuzmenko, clear that money, have the cap space above all anyway. And so even if you lose out on Elias Lindholm, then you paid the rental price of the first round pick and that little extra sweetener, and you got out of the money. And that's what I like about it for Vancouver.
100%. Rick Tocchet had no use for Kuzmenko. That's a fact. Like we'd seen that for a year and a half now.
And it frees up money in both the short term, like AKA now, and in the future, right? Because you lose that 5.5. There's 1 year left on that. And then,
one more,
one more year, right? So next year they were on the hook for another $5.5 million. So that frees that up for the Canucks next season. Obviously, we know that there's a pretty big contract, a UFA contract for them with Elias Pettersson, right? But they still have they can add a player of around $2 million cap hit at the deadline. So they bring in Lindholm, they still have assets and they still have money to spend. And I think that's another thing that just makes this. I know there were some people I think as far as a win-win goes, like this looks like it, because I know people in Calgary were happy about this too. Craig Conroy was talking about, how Kuzmenko is what they want right now. They need a right shot. They want guys who can score goals. They think he'd be able to do that in Calgary. We'll see if that actually happens, because even Lindholm wasn't scoring goals in Calgary. He had 9 so far this season. And I look at Lindholm and he'll be able to produce in Vancouver. I don't know if Kuzmenko is going to just all of a sudden start producing in Vancouver if he's not shooting 27%. But I think the Flames are happy with the return too, with getting the assets as well. Max, are you familiar with the top prospect that's coming back in the deal? It's Brustevich. Did I mess that up?
No, you're right. Familiar. I wouldn't say I know his game like intimately. The profile is puck moving defenseman. Obviously, I think it's easy to get carried away with what that looks like when you're looking at the junior numbers, though. Like we're gonna have to see what this player looks like as a pro. When you hear like puck moving defenseman who lit up the OHL, I'm sure you love to think, big time, whatever, Ryan Ellis type. I don't think it's necessarily that, but it's at least they get themselves a flyer at a player. And I think that's where, if you're Craig Conroy, you like knowing what you're getting in this return more so than a, vague nebulous draft pick. And that's going to take even longer. So I like that as a part of this trade. I don't know that it's going to ultimately be what the trade hinges on, though. I think you're still looking at the first and the Kuzmenko as the 2 top assets. And then Brustevich is we'll see what happens there. And if he's great, then this is a great return for Calgary, obviously.
Yeah, he's popped in the OHL this year. And Drance had a pretty good Q&A. Yeah, Drance had a Q&A with him one-on-one in November, I believe. So if there's Flames fans listening to this, you can check that out if you want to get to know your newest prospect. One question I had for Sean, obviously, you mentioned Jim Rutherford, and this is such a Jim Rutherford deal. But to kind of zoom out on like what he and Patrick Allvin have done, like I think everyone knows, like I don't want to say that Jim Rutherford is pulling all of the strings, but we know that he's involved in stuff and we've seen how he's operated before. Like you've said this a lot, like he is a GM who understands the gift, and like they are sitting first in the NHL right now. Their coach is going to maybe win Coach of the Year, if not just be in the conversation. They're going to have guys in the conversation for like every award when we're talking about Demko, Quinn Hughes. So I'm just curious, like, how would you look at the move that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin made here? And like zooming out though, like how would you assess their body of work over the last little bit? Like, are they doing a good job with the Canucks, essentially, is my roundabout way of asking that question.
To me, this is like, imagine a Jim Rutherford deal, like the platonic ideal of a trade that Jim Rutherford makes. And it's this, because he identified a need in Vancouver, which I don't want to say he's great at it, because sometimes in the past, he's identified the wrong needs, like his perception maybe hasn't matched up with what, say, the Penguins needed at times. But the point in the instructive part here is that for better or worse, he's like, okay, we need this, we need thing X, and I'm going to go get it. And it's been timed with Pittsburgh. It was speed, which they did need, and that's why they ended up winning 2 straight cups. And then at times it was toughness, which they didn't need so much. And you could argue hastened, their downfall kind of into mediocrity when they went out and got Ryan Reeves, and then, screwed up a bunch of stuff financially for them and blah, 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 blah. The point for Vancouver is that he knew what they needed. It was correct. And then he went and got it, which the Canucks are a much better 5-on-5 team today than they were yesterday. Significantly so. They needed another, we'll say second, whatever, Elias Lindholm, he's a second line center on a contending team, right? Like he's like the definition of that guy who, like, if he's your 1C, you're probably fine. If you have him surrounded with the right pieces. If he's your 2C though, you are set. And that's kind of, to me, that's kind of the role, for better or worse, that he's filling here. He went out and did it 5 weeks ahead of the trade deadline, which is something Jim has always loved to do.
Yep.
He doesn't care. He'll set the market. And he'll go out and get a guy a month ahead. Because, like, look, do you really think that on March 5th that Elias Lindholm would have gotten much more than this? A first-round pick, a roster player and a a mid-level prospect, let's say. Come on. How much more was Elias Lindholm going to get on deadline day? Now,
right.
What's the end result? You get 5 more weeks of him than you would have than you would have in March. He gets that much more time to incorporate himself into the lineup, that much more time to help bank you points, on and on. This is like the perfect Jim Rutherford deal. So I'm not surprised, or the whatever. Let's give Patrick Allvin some credit. He's whether he's doing the stuff that Jim tells him to do, or whatever the power dynamics are there. Like, they nailed this one for sure.
And the Canucks are a perfect team for Jim Rutherford to do this with, right? Because especially toward the tail end in Pittsburgh, it kind of seemed like you wanted the guy who was going to make these trades when you had the goods to go win it all with that upgrade. The problem was when you started to not be one player away, he was still making trades that were giving away futures to try and get there, which is admirable. I love the ambition, but you want to have a team that's capable of making good on it. Totally. And say what you want about the shooting percentage, the save percentage. I think we're at a point where we can agree Vancouver's in that range, right?
Absolutely.
100%. That's kind of what I meant when I said, like, their coach is going to be in the conversation for the Jack Adams. Like, Quinn Hughes is going to be in the Norris conversation. We're going to be talking about Demko for the Vezina. This team is first in the NHL right now. Like, this is when you talk about GMs who like to take their cues from their team. That's the Brad Tree Living line is, I'll take my cue from my team on what I do at the deadline. Like, the Canucks are telling their general manager, we are good enough to add to. And I think what's impressive about this deal is, like, they already had center depth, but now it's even better. And Lindholm is versatile enough that he can provide more depth at center, or he can kick out to the wing, or Elias Pettersson can play up the middle or kick out to wing, as we already talked about. Like, there's going to be so many options for Rick Tocchet to play with. And Lindholm too is, he can play on the power play and they need that production, but he's also very defensively strong. He can play on the PK. He can eat tough minutes. Like, if Elias Lindholm is still on a scoring drought 2 weeks from now, like, there are things that he can provide to this Canucks team that is still going to be valuable, because there's other guys who can take the offense. Obviously, you want Lindholm to score. He scored over 40 goals, 2 years ago. So I like this for the Canucks a lot.
He's also a player that Jim Rutherford has had before. He drafted him.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
Max brought that up in our little
What
chat.
do you mean?
So Jim Rutherford,
he was the GM of the Hurricanes whenever Elias Lindholm was drafted.
Are you serious? Oh.
Yes.
So that when Sean was talking about this being the platonic Jim Rutherford trade, Rutherford loves to get guys back.
Right. That's why everyone was like, Jake Gensel or whatever.
Right.
It's true.
As
because
Sean
it
was
happens.
Talking, I slid into the chat like, but he's not a guy he's had before. I completely.
I had to make sure, because it was.
Oh,
I believe he was. It looks like he was Rutherford's last first round pick with Hurricanes. And the other thing, Hailey, the other question you asked, like, big picture, like, what kind of job is that administration doing with the Canucks? I'm not sure what else you would want him to do. Right? Like, I know there's been some problematic starts there, and Elias Lindholm is an RFA after the season, so they need to get that figured out. No, Elias Pettersson is a
Pettersson. I thought you said Lindholm.
We got two Elias.
I think I might have said Elias instead of Elias, so whatever. I combined the two, but he got Quinn Hughes locked up for a few more years. That's probably gonna it's a little bit of a bridge deal, so whatever. But he's cleared space. He's corrected his mistakes, which is such a Rutherford thing, where it's like he's got a way of, like, working his way out of this. Like Kuzmenko, that's a bad contract. It was bad. It was bad the day it was signed.
Imagine what they could have gotten for him when he was on that, like, $39 37 goal pace that season.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, they just use him as a main piece to get back Elias Lindholm. So, like, say what you will about Rutherford. He's not above criticism, God knows. But what that dude is not afraid to do is go back and hit the erase button on all this stuff. So, like, but like long term, I think from a cap standpoint, they're significantly better off than they were before. You know, Pettersson is the major long-term question there. But man, like, they're the team. They're, if not the team to beat league wide, they're in the top 3 at this point, let's say. And they just went out and got a bunch better. Like, it's great. Yeah. It's great to see. This is why Jim Rutherford is good for the NHL, is because he does this sort of shit. Like the dude's in it to win it every year. If there's any realistic possibility, right? And he makes it fun. We're lucky to have him around.